This podcast is brought to you by Penji. Penji is a creative subscription service that gives you access to pre-vetted, agency-trained creatives from all over the world. From graphic design to illustrations to social media management and web development, it's all included for one monthly price. It's time to say goodbye to the hassle of searching for top-notch creative talent. With Penji, you get quality and consistency delivered right to your inbox every day. Carefully crafted for you by humans. So meet your new creative team today. Head over to penji.co for more and enter the coupon code located within the podcast show notes.
Right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Unified Purpose, the podcast where we share inspiring tales of compassion, resilience, and community spirit. I'm your host, Oliver, Penji's partnership advisor, and I'm joined here with a very special guest, Patsy Steinmeyer from the Brookfield Zoo, Chicago. Patsy, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's such a privilege to be here and love the work that you're doing to share the work of so many impactful nonprofits. It's really special to be here today. So thank you for the invitation.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you having you here. So before we dive into the zoo and let's warm up with a quick game I like to call Pitch Me This. You'll have 30 seconds to pitch me a totally silly business idea. I have the prompt ready right here. So are you ready, Patsy?
I am ready.
Okay, so the prompt for today is a bakery where you are served by people in gorilla costumes. Go.
Oh my goodness, that is not a silly idea at all. In fact, I think that's magnificent. Every bakery should have you be served by gorillas. And this is why. Gorillas, an immense part of their diet is going to be fruits and vegetables. And they are very, very healthy eaters. So this will be one of the most healthy bakeries that there, could possibly be. If you're served by a gorilla, then I would think that they would also, be endorsing this product and eat it themselves. So it will be a very healthy establishment. And I think that it will sell fruits and vegetables as like the treat of the day that no one can resist. So yes, I think that's a fabulous, fabulous idea.
I'm sold. If a gorilla likes it, I'm sure I will like it too.
That's right. Eat like a gorilla. That's what we say.
Like a gorilla. That's a very Sioux thing to say. Well, Patsy, to start us off then, can you tell us a little bit more about yourself and your story with the Brookfield Zoo, Chicago?
Yes, and I have been at Brookfield Zoo, Chicago now since July of 2022, and my role there is I'm the manager of professional learning and kindergarten through 12th grade academic programming, and that's part of our education and community engagement team, which is under the leadership of our Vice President, Kevin Conley. And my unit, Professional Learning and K-12 Academics, is directed by Lisa Kelly, who directs our education strategies and research. So it's a wonderful team to be a part of. We design teacher professional learning programs and student resources for the Chicago, the surrounding community, but many are online and available throughout the nation or the world, or whoever can access them on our website. Our education and community engagement department also includes our King's Conservation and Leadership Academy, which serves high school students who are connected with the zoo, our Explorers program, family outreach, and community outreach of all kinds. But my niche is with the formal academic world. So I am working with teachers who are in the classroom. I'm working with creating resources for them to use in their classrooms and at the zoo when they visit on site, and those sorts of things. Our huge project for the last couple of years has been our innovative teaching safari program. And this has been such a pleasure to design, having teachers come to the zoo to learn not only about teaching strategies, but also about the animals and nature at the zoo and connect with us in that way. So that kind of gives you an overview of my position at the zoo.
That sounds great. I love how it connects not only, hey, come here, visit the zoo, and then leave. No, it goes beyond that. It goes through education, connecting with schools, with the families, and even the wider community at large. You mentioned that you deal with these programs for the schools. Are there any that's like, let's say, your favorite?
Oh gosh, well, the teaching safari has got to be my favorite. And, I come to being involved with that through the path of having been an educator myself. I have really appreciated having the zoo as a classroom for teachers. I did not grow up in a place where we had a zoo close to us. I'm from Corning, New York, and it's a small town, wonderful, where they make Corningware dishes, if you've ever heard of them. And so being around a zoo is just a real privilege for me, and brought my kids there, etc. But my path to education, of course, was, you needed to do the typical thing, which was, of course, go to law school. That's what I did, because the kids are so smart, you have to be able to keep up with them. So I'm actually a career changer and stepped into the education world because I really do believe in it. And also, I stepped into it as one who was writing kids' songs and children's songs and performing. And, like music, I think that animals and nature are a universal language that bring people together and that inspire children to learn, that engage both young and old. And so having a teacher program here at the zoo has been a really fun thing to do. Should your classroom be a zoo? Absolutely. If it's anything like Brookfield Zoo Chicago, which is a real place for learning.
Lovely to hear. It actually reminds me a lot, because I talk with many nonprofit leaders, and they always tell me, yeah, I started in this career, but in like a couple of years went by and I realized that I really love doing this or helping that. And Patricia, I love that you combine your love for the zoo with your education, and then you teach all of these kids about it. So it's really lovely to hear this combination of your knowledge being given to the kids.
Well, yes, and we do that indirectly, because the people that I serve really are teachers. So our program, our teaching safari program, you asked me what my favorite effort was, is really to teach teachers how to connect their students with conservation science, with nature and animals in the classroom and through our resources at the zoo. And so we are impacting students really through teachers who have the ability, if you think about it, to touch hundreds and potentially thousands of students. And our teaching safari program is actually a free program, thanks to many of our supporters, such as Polk Brothers Foundation, Christopher Foundation, our Women's Board, CDW, and we have an Institute of Museum and Library Sciences grant. So lots of different contributors have made this wonderful program possible. And teachers apply. They come from schools. We met all over Chicagoland, all over the suburbs, and we give special consideration to teachers in Chicago public schools and those who teach low-income populations. They apply and they can choose to get 2 free graduate credits through Dominican University, or just free 35 hours of professional development through the Illinois State Board of Education. So this is ongoing learning for teachers who are already serving kids in the classroom, which is such a challenging and important job. And so when we're connecting kids, we're looking at kids who we want to encourage to come to the zoo through their schools. Many have already visited with their families, but we want them to really understand the zoo as a place of learning. And so we're giving teachers tools, resources, and strategies to do that. And we're also giving them strategies to connect students with wildlife and nature in the classroom and beyond and in their communities. And, as I said, I grew up in a small town. We had woods behind our house and lakes and turned over rocks, looked for salamanders and insects. For many kids, nature is not as accessible anymore. And if you want to inspire conservation leaders, we really need to find ways to connect them. And this is so central to our mission here at Brookfield Zoo Chicago. Our tagline, of course, is connect, care, and conserve. If you're going to inspire conservation action and caring, you have to begin with that connection, which is so important. And so, that is one of our main missions in including teachers, is teaching them how to connect students, but also using resources from a zoo that's a place of learning. We're also incorporating research-based teaching strategies to engage kids with inquiry, hands-on learning, questioning, and really engaging them with science, not only in science class, but across disciplines.
Oh, so yeah, when you mention hands-on, do you mean that the kids go and is there like a petting part of the zoo?
A very, very good question. When we talk about hands-on learning in the classroom or at the zoo, that can mean just that. It could mean going to a petting zoo, but a lot of teachers, they can't really bring kids to a petting zoo every day in the classroom. We want them to come to Brookfield Zoo Chicago. So hands-on learning can be things like bringing in nature from outside. It can be observing animals, birds, and other classroom pets, animals in our own backyard, or coming to the zoo, observing animals. It can take the form of what we call problem-based learning, which is stepping into the role of a zoo scientist and as a student designing a zoo exhibit, or thinking about how we might use, what we know about nutrition to create a diet for bears that changes. How can we look at the work of maybe our zoo nutritionist, Dr. Jen Watts, who has designed special diets for bears, and think about how we might show that on a graph, or, think about why that's important, step into those scientific roles. So there's lots of ways to do hands-on learning in the classroom. And so that's what I mean by that.
Oh, wow. It goes way beyond what I thought it was. My experience with zoos are only, I go visit and maybe pet a capybara, or I don't know, a penguin.
Wonderful.
And that's my experience when I was in high school. But yeah, it's amazing to see that it not only can be a place where kids connect with nature, but they also learn from it through their teachers.
Yes, absolutely. And that's so important. Research really does show that those early experiences with nature that we have, like what you had, petting a capybara, or what I had, maybe going in the woods, those are really important connections, because when we have a chance to really relate to animals, then we develop a sense of caring. We see how beautiful they are. We see that wow factor. We experience that joy of being around animals, and then we would naturally be more inclined to care about them. So many of our conservation leaders are actually people who have had these positive experiences with nature, or at some point along their life journey have connected with animals and nature in a way that show them why that is so important, why they should value it.
Yeah, that reminds me of something. I think I just made a connection here. I think because I went to the zoo in high school and saw a lot of animals and petted a capybara, I realized that ever since then, I loved, watching bears, grizzly bears, just videos of grizzly bears, just being bears in the woods. And I even dreamed of having one as a pet, but I know if that's not right. And what I want to say is that, I think showing or giving these kids these connections with nature, with animals when they are young, they'll grow up to be someone who cares about the conservation of them, of the conservation of the animals and nature. And maybe in the future, they'll be part of the zoo.
Oh, absolutely. And you point to something else that's really important for learning, and that I think zoos are uniquely situated to help people with. You said, after you petted the capybara, you like to observe, these pictures of bears or bears acting like bears.
Yep.
And this observation piece is actually very, very important. Kids, a lot of the time we're rushing. We're listening to our, we're tapped into our telephones. We're going from one place to another. We have so many stimuli. We don't stop and really watch. And that's one thing that, we can do when we come to a zoo or when we interact with nature is take a minute. And if you've ever watched an animal for even just 1 minute as a child, and let kids, looking at the zoo, it's very interesting. Are the kids the first ones to walk away from the animals, or is it the adults who are leading them away? I think we need to give kids time to really watch, because when kids observe, a natural thing that comes out of that is questioning. They're going to watch, they're going to have that natural curiosity, they're going to ask questions. And in education, that's a really powerful learning tool, the questions that come from your heart. And, we want kids to pay attention to books, to read for long periods of time, to build up stamina. But are we encouraging them to really look at the nature around them carefully, to really, pay attention to detail and wonder about that? So that's an important learning strategy, as well as one that helps to connect kids and teachers to nature and wildlife.
Yeah, it's like a whole new other world. And I would like to add something to that too. Kids ask questions, but they also, in my experience, they also mimic or imitate what they see. And in this world, in this modern world, where all of them, as you said, are overly stimulated, constantly on the phone, maybe having this experience in the zoo, watching these animals, just being animals, wandering around, relaxing, maybe it can help them too, to imitate, to mimicry them, and just relax for a bit. Because in my opinion, a zoo visit is not only a learning experience, but a relaxing one.
Yes, it can be very relaxing and very joyful. And, it's funny. One of my favorite lessons for teachers, I have a group of teachers coming in from the classroom, and we are going to be learning about, say, questioning strategies, classroom strategies, in a place at the zoo called Great Bear Wilderness. And this classroom has 2 floor-to-ceiling windows that you look out onto either a polar bear or a brown bear on one side, bison on the other. So you've got these teachers here, and here I am teaching them. Now, anyone who's been a teacher in a classroom knows what it's like when you have your agenda to teach, right? And the students aren't paying attention to it. Maybe they're paying attention to something else. And with me, it could be sugar ants walking across the floor. All of a sudden, that's really interesting, right? And what's so cool about this too is that, with those windows, I'll start this professional development for teachers, and the teachers naturally catch the view of a bear out the window, and they're going to the window and they're looking at it. And that's so joyful. And it's a perfect time to model this idea of, okay, I have my agenda to teach you, but I see there's something there that's made you go, oh, wow, isn't that amazing? As a teacher, how do I run with that? Let's say, okay, yes, wow, there's a bear. Let's look at it. Let's take time. What questions do you have? How do we bring this in and make this something that we can learn from? Why did those bear claws look like that? Why do you think that bear has so much fat on it at this time of year? Why do you think its head has that particular shape? You can pretty much leverage that joyful moment, that relaxing moment, that inspiration and joy from the animals to show teachers how we can build on student interests and questions to really inspire learning. So that's another really fun thing about teaching teachers at a zoo.
I actually picture myself in teaching like one of those classrooms and seeing a bear, a grizzly bear. And you mentioned a polar bear. That's something that I have never seen in my life. I only seen it on videos, but I would love to. Actually, I don't know if my bear fanboy is showing, but I really love those animals. Actually, I would like to pet one day.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So you mentioned a lot of programs. Are there any, any stories that stand out to you that you would like to share with me?
Any stories that stand out? Well, these will have to come from, teachers and students that I work with. There's many stories, of course, that I've heard from others. But my favorite ones are when teachers come in and for the first time, they pet a penguin, or for the first time, they fed a goat, or for the first time, they fed a giraffe, or saw an animal up close like a pangolin. This is one of the most endangered animals in the world, and we have a very, very successful pangolin program.
Good question, Patsy.
Yes.
A pangolin is the animal that becomes like a little ball, right? To roll around?
Absolutely, it is. You've got it. It's a mammal, and that's great that you know. There are 8 different kinds of pangolins in Africa and Asia, and they are very much endangered because they are hunted not only for their scales, but also for food. There's habitat fragmentation, all kinds of things, and these animals are very challenging to raise in managed care. But we've learned a ton about them at Brookfield Zoo. And actually, our zoo is one of the North American Penguin Consortium, which is a leader in protecting these animals. And we've managed to actually breed pangolins at the zoo. And so really exciting. But many of our teachers maybe weren't aware of pangolins. And what an interesting animal that is to teach children, because here we have a mammal that has scales on it. It's really on the outer fringe of what you think of as a mammal. So, what makes a mammal a mammal? What makes a reptile a reptile? There's a great animal right there for teaching and learning.
That's the question, yeah.
Absolutely. So, my stories are, when we give those teachers that wow factor, that joy in learning. And, when you experience that joy in learning, it kind of helps you to remember, I think, why it is we went into teaching in the first place. And what is that excitement that we want to convey back to our students? And when I hear stories of teachers going back and sharing what they learned at the zoo and using the materials that we've given or bringing kids on site and saying, wow, my kids were really asking questions. They were really engaged. They really are inspired. And, they created this artwork, or, those are those stories that we really love, because those are the connections we are trying to make.
It's like a little snowball effect. The teacher sees something and shares it with the kids. It's a process that I talk a lot with many other education-focused nonprofits, and I distinctly remember a small phrase that one of my guests said. It's like a process of turning the unknown into joy.
Absolutely, and joy is such an important component in teaching and learning and inspiring. I think sometimes too, and our zoo is very, very engaged with helping to deal with very difficult issues in the world right now. How do we help animals in the face of climate change when their homes in nature are disappearing? How do we, keep biodiversity as species are dying out? How do we help? We've our Mexican wolf recovery program. We're reintroducing wolves into the ecosystem, or with our Guam kingfishers, these birds that have disappeared from Guam due to snakes that have populated the area. How can we bring these populations back? Very difficult questions, and I think that sometimes we, particularly with kids, we're telling them about all of these problems, and this joy, that zoos provide, before we can expect kids to take on conservation leadership roles. We want to show them how wonderful these animals are and the good things that people are actually doing. And there's so many role models and examples and people who are doing great work at the zoo, so many scientists, that I think it helps to show kids, you're not powerless. There's things that we can do together. You can be part of this mission. And so, teaching them how to love animals, but also showing them the positive work that's being done all over the world, that a zoo isn't just a place. A zoo is a mission. And we can be inspired by that and be a part of that.
That's lovely to hear. And yeah, that raises a very particular question that I would like to follow up with. You see, I talk with a lot of nonprofits, and just like you, Patsy, they specialize in one way of working. You specialize with the zoo, with education, with animals. And what we do here at Unified Purpose is we spread the word. We give you an audience so you can reach out to. And so, in your experience, what is one essential insight or perspective that you gained in your work that you would like to share with people who maybe only see zoos as places that they can visit and just leave?
Well, I think that you've hit on it, absolutely. And that is that it's beyond just being a place. A zoo is a place where we can make connections, certainly with animals, but it's also, and we look at our 21st century zoo, it's a place that, and Brookfield Zoo Chicago has a wonderful 21st century plan. We're coming up on 100 years and putting a lot of thought and resources into infrastructure and all of that. So the zoo is a giant classroom for learning. But I think the insight, one essential insight, is that this classroom extends far beyond the zoo. This mission, it's an inclusive mission. And it's about bringing people in, having them connect, either, at the zoo or through our partnerships throughout the world, having them be part of our mission and finding ways to be inclusive so that everyone feels a part of it and can come and lend their talents and perspective to really supporting animals and nature and animals. That's what our zoo is about, and making it a better world. So I think it's just that we extend beyond just being a place, and we become a mission where we become something that's living and can be passed on to through the people that we connect with.
Great to hear. And that's a perfect follow-up for this last question. And how do you see the Brookfield Zoo Chicago doing in the next 3 to 5 years? Any milestones that you're especially excited about?
Well, there really are. So much is happening. And this summer, we just opened our Bramson Tropical Forests habitat for primates, for example, which is one of the largest, most beautiful outdoor primate habitats in the nation. It's just absolutely magnificent. And I see the zoo following along those lines, really so much study, so much effort is going into making leaps and bounds and progress in animal welfare, in the lives of animals at the zoo, but also in the lives of animals outside the zoo and in nature, and through our partnerships, such as the pangolin, such as the Mexican wolf, such as Humboldt penguins in Peru. There's animals throughout the world that will benefit through the connections that we are making. So on an individual level, on a learning level, people can come to the zoo and they're going to see, I think, a lot of really innovative developments with our animal habitats and connections that they can make with their own environment and that in which of the animals that they see, and also in our outreach into communities and throughout the world. I think, the Brookfield Zoo Chicago is just a wonderful teacher and educator and resource for people to be aware of. And in terms of teaching and learning programs, of course, we hope that our teaching safari will continue to grow and include more teachers. But we also have online resources. If you cannot visit the zoo, if you're visiting online, we have classes, teacher education classes, and I can give you links to those if your listeners are interested in learning more about our education program or accessing some of our educational resources and programming that's available online. But yes, I just see the zoo as just growing and thriving and becoming more and even more of a leader than it already is in the field of conservation science and animal welfare.
That's wonderful to hear, Patsy. And with that hopeful vision of the future, we'll wrap up today's conversation. Thank you so much for sharing your story and the impact Brookfield Zoo Chicago is making through education and conservation. To our listeners, if you'd like to connect with the Brookfield Zoo Chicago, whether by visiting, volunteering, or checking out the programs that Patsy mentioned here, you can check out the links in the description. Thanks as always for tuning in. And Patsy, thank you once again for your time.
Thank you so much, Oliver. It was a pleasure talking to you.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
You've been listening to Unified Purpose, brought to you by Penji. Check out the show notes to learn more about today's guest. And to learn more about Penji, the human-first creative subscription service, head over to penji.co. And by the way, if you're still listening, it would mean the absolute world to us if you were to share this podcast with a friend and, of course, subscribe.